Autovista 24's takeaways from the FT Live's Future of the Car event, the major trends from the used car market in the first quarter, and the latest job cuts news. This is the Automotive Update, presented by Autovista 24. I'm Autovista 24 editor Tom Geggus, here with the latest edition of the Automotive Update. I'm here to give you the latest headlines from Autovista 24 and the wider automotive industry. This week, FT Live opened its doors to its major automotive event, the Future of the Car. Autovista 24 attended the event both in person and digitally, so here to discuss the major takeaways from this event with me is special content editor Phil Curry.
Hi Tom, good to be here as always.
Now, I don't mind getting us started here because I think one of the biggest talking points from this week's event was uncertainty. Car makers are having to deal with so many different pressure points at the moment. There are economic complications, ongoing international conflict, and the big word again this year has been tariffs, which is creating a lot of new car pricing uncertainty. Barbara Frenkel, the member of the executive board for procurement at Porsche AG, said that we have to allow open trade and gave quite a keen example for Europe not having its own battery supply chain, and of course with car makers being pushed to produce more zero and low emission vehicle cars, those batteries are going to be so important. And she said that tariffs on Chinese built battery electric vehicles are effectively just a tool to buy time for the EU, but that tariffs are not actually a great measure to keep competition under control. Instead, she suggested that we have to play to our regional strengths because the European automotive industry has an established network which it's created over so many years across so many countries. I also found it quite interesting that Benjamin Krieger, the Secretary General at CLEPA, said that profit expectations are dropping and a lot of manufacturers are expecting to make a loss this year. So cross-border tariffs are making slim margins even slimmer. I think another really noticeable voice from the event as well was Lynn Calder, the CEO of Ineos Automotive. She pointed out that the industry is effectively on its knees from all the pressure it's currently under, and part of that was definitely powertrain related, and she pointed out that hybrids are effectively banned from 2035, but that might as well be tomorrow for car makers for all the planning they have to do to get those kind of changes through. And she did talk up hybrids as a solution for range anxiety and for reaching emissions targets, because she believes that there's not really a chance that we see only electric vehicles from 2035 and that black and white thinking doesn't really work when it comes to powertrains. Finally, from me, John Sarafet, the deputy CEO of Avens, said they were actually living in a world of uncertainty, but a lot of players have just learnt to adapt and have become more flexible. I did also find it very interesting when he started talking about used battery electric vehicles and the future used car markets, that battery health is actually going to become the new mileage. So when consumers come onto forecourts, they're not necessarily going to be looking at that mileage number. Instead, they'll be looking at what state the battery's in.
And speaking about batteries, Tom, that was one of the sessions I was keen to follow, which was a discussion around battery technology and production in Europe. The subject of building gigafactories has gone quiet over the last few years. There was a lot of talk from car makers about localizing the battery supply chain across the continent, but with the collapse of Northvolt recently, it seems that to do so is actually quite a struggle now. And there was also a lot of talk about investment in battery production, with discussion around the fact that investments need to be technology savvy. Now, Robin Francis, who is head of lithium marketing at Glencore, highlighted that car makers are going down the route of LFP batteries. Those are lithium phosphate batteries. But in Europe, the production of these batteries seems to be further behind than other parts of the world. He highlighted that perhaps European manufacturers need some help from Asia, and that help could also include developing their production capabilities when it comes to the battery supply chain. Towards the end of the discussion, Francis also highlighted the need for state aid in battery production, as well as continued aid when it comes to the EV industry as a whole. He pointed out that subsidies in countries have decreased. We've seen French subsidies drop down. We've seen Germany cut subsidies completely for EV sales. But in order to help the transition to greener vehicles, he pointed out that incentives are needed across the board. And when it comes to battery chemistries, he also talked a lot about how car makers are dealing with lithium iron phosphate, but the industry is moving on to LMFP, which is lithium iron phosphate with manganese. There are also talks in the industry about sodium ion and solid-state batteries, and he believes that this evolution will continue. Sodium ion development is barely starting, he said, and will take a few years to come through, and this could lead to cheaper batteries, which will in turn lead to cheaper electric vehicles. But he also pointed out that it's not easy for the EV industry to just change chemistries when it comes to battery production. A lot of work is involved, more so than it would be for, say, a mobile phone factory to change battery production. Because EVs have bigger batteries, there's more cells involved, it means different production methods. So that's one to keep in mind when it comes to battery production across Europe.
Now, Phil, the other big bone of contention for the electric vehicle industry is charging infrastructure, because it feels like range anxiety, there's more of a handle on for many car makers, but without the charging infrastructure to support those vehicles, it's still going to be so difficult to convince buyers to adopt that technology.
Absolutely, and Sigrid de Vries, Secretary General of ASEA, pointed out that 60% of charging points in the EU are concentrated in the Netherlands, Germany and France, just 3 countries. So there's a significant gap across the remaining 24 EU member states. So if you're pushing for EV sales, those countries are leading, others may be struggling, and part of the reason why is because there's no charging infrastructure. It is very much chicken and egg when it comes to that. She also highlighted that between 3,500 to 8,000 charging points need to be built weekly to meet target, but current development is insufficient. Stephen Marvin, Director of R&D at the PFA, also highlighted that stagnation in the European EV market is not helping the business case when it comes to charging. Investors just don't see it as a viable solution at the moment. He said that governments need to work together to help with financing. While EV rollout is at a level these governments want to be at, it needs to be supported by a strong charging infrastructure. So charging really is the bottleneck for the EV market at the moment in terms of adoption. That's one of the main takeaways from that panel. I suppose one area that really caught my eye, and I know you sat in on this one, Tom, was discussion around dealerships and how they're progressing in what at the moment is a changing automotive market.
Absolutely, Phil. There were quite a few interesting discussions around dealerships, and one that caught my eye quite early on was Polestar's CEO Michael Loscheller talking about the renaissance of dealerships, and he made it quite clear that he wasn't that impressed with direct sales models, and instead emphasised the need for high-performance dealers, because buyers are now coming equipped with so much more information after conducting a lot of online research. Now, that is only a very short and snappy insight into what was, quite frankly, an enormous 3-day event. But Phil, I am going to ask you to stay with us for our next segment. This week, Autovista24 published an insight into Europe's Big 5 used car markets, which is a piece you wrote, Phil. Now, for anyone who might not know, which markets are we talking about when we say the Big 5?
So the Big 5 includes France, Germany, Italy, Spain and the UK, those markets that have the biggest volumes of both new and used car sales in Europe.
And what did you see as being a unifying trend across the first quarter of 2025 for these markets?
Well, while the new car markets have been very up and down, we've seen some struggles in some of the Big 5 markets. The main trend across the used car sector was growth. Each market improved in the first quarter compared to the first quarter of 2024, and there really is a strength in that sector that we're not seeing translate into new car registrations.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Phil. If there was one used car market that really stood out to you in the first quarter of this year, which one of the Big 5 would it be?
Honestly, there's no question, it's Spain. Spain is performing so well across both new and used car. While new car registrations were up 14.1% in the first quarter, used car figures were up 8.6% in the same period. It was the biggest growth across the Big 5. Now, there was an improvement every month of the year. The only other country to do that in the Big 5 was Italy, but Spain has really been building its automotive market over the last few months. It's also worth noting in the UK, there are over 2 million used car transactions in the first quarter of this year, which was up 2.7% and was the highest volume of the big five markets. It's also the first time that more than 2 million used cars have been sold in the UK since the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, we're seeing a used car market that is back on track.
Now to read Phil's article, which takes a deep dive into each of the big five European used car markets, just head over to Autovista 24. I'll make sure there is a link in the show notes of this episode. And make sure you're signed up for our email as well. That way you'll get the latest news straight to your inbox. And make sure you subscribe to the Autovista 24 podcast wherever you listen to us. And check out Autovista 24's YouTube channel as well. You'll find our What Is It Explainer videos, Launchport series, and webinar recordings there. Once again, I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. This week, Nissan confirmed it aims to cut its workforce by 20,000 between fiscal years 2024 and 2027. This number does include the previously announced reduction of 9,000 workers. Also by 2027, the carmaker is looking to close 7 plants. Meanwhile, workers at Ford's 2 car plants in Cologne, Germany, went on strike this week. They were protesting planned job cuts across the carmaker's European operations. Workers voted to strike after the company announced it would cut around 14% of its European workforce back in November 2024. If you'd like to explore today's stories in more depth, head to the show notes and click the link to our companion article on Autovista 24. A big thanks to Phil Curry for co-starring and co-producing this episode. Additional thanks go to Autovista 24 web editor James Roberts and journalist Tom Hooker. The music was Better Find a Solution Fast by Richard Ames. Thank you for listening to the Autovista 24 podcast.